What's something you found so pretentious that it actually rendered you speechless? Story 1 from my elderly mother. I have never ever in my entire life ever done anything to apologize to anyone for. Same woman who did not report my rape I was 12 to the authorities because it would look bad to the neighbors. It was a neighbor who raped me. She wrote him a check and he moved away. Story 2 am not ashamed to admit that I'm a Christian, but you don't need to be in the pew to know that there is something wrong in this country when gays can serve openly in the military, but our kids can't openly celebrate Christmas or pray in school. As president, it'll end Obama's war on religion, and it'll fight against liberal attacks on our religious heritage. Faith made America strong. It can make her strong again. How pretentious America could be a guy. Story 3. I was once stuck with a social group of CEOs. They didn't know me. I mostly kept to myself and listened to their talk. I guess in order to bond, a woman was telling the rest of her shameful secret she liked to occasionally eat at Outback Steakhouse. She really got a ribbing from everyone. They were merciless. She, red-faced, staring at the floor, giggled that she thought it was exciting that she never knew who else might be in there. She might actually be eating a table away from her garbage man. I exchanged pleasant small talk with a few group members. I work construction, but being a petite, nicely dressed woman, I guess I wasn't sending off vibes. As we were parting ways and I was walking away, I distinctly heard a woman whisper, "Is she blue collar?" 1:11 I've never been so happy to not be upper class and have these people as my social circle. Story 4. I was working with a client in my showroom, and another client of mine had called twice. My coworker gave me the message, and I called him back right after my consultation was over. He was pissed that I didn't excuse myself to answer his phone call. Apparently, he told my coworker that merely taking a message was inexcusable because of the thousands of dollars he had spent. He told me, "This is pretty much verbatim. Tell your coworkers that if I call you to be notified immediately, you will excuse yourself immediately and get on the phone. Your other clients won't mind." He explained that his calls will only take a minute or two. Guess how long that particular conversation was? 56 minutes. Dude's in his early 60s. You never outgrow being a spoiled brat. Story 5. When I was working a shitty job in my younger days, a customer was upset that he had to wait in line like everyone else before being able to make his purchase. He actually said, "Do you know who I am? I own hotels," to which I replied, "Well, sir, I'm sorry, but this isn't Monopoly, this is Krispy Kreme." He was not pleased. Story 6. Don't know if it's quite the proper definition of pretentious, but my aunt was telling me her son liked rock music. I said that was cool and that I liked rap. She goes, "Oh, Jared, a lot deeper than that. Great, thank you for that." I got a chuckle out of it, though, because I knew my cousin liked rap just as much as me, so it just proved how clueless she was about her own kids. Story 7. Someone once told me that physicists aren't smart. They're just overthinkers. I opened and closed my mouth soundlessly for about a minute, and then left the room to go scream elsewhere. Edit, I should explain that this person is saying that from the hardcore religious, I understand the universe because God made it point of view. Story 8. There was this one woman who blogged about going on a blind date and how it was going smoothly until she found out that her date was an ex-Magic the Gathering world champion and how she couldn't date somebody like that. I read it and I got so frustrated. It was so shallow, so obnoxious. Not all gamers are 40-year-old virgin neckbeards. I don't even play that many video games, but God, that really got my blood boiling. Point to anybody who has the link to the blog. I can't find it. Story 9. My poet ex-boyfriend would read his own poems aloud to his MacBook, so in case anything happened to him, there would be a recording of just how he wanted them inflected. Story 10. I've never been rendered speechless is a pretty easy word to utter no matter how tied your tongue is. In 2005 or so, I went to a Don Hertzfeldt animation screening in San Francisco with QA scheduled for afterwards. During the QA, an absolutely classic hipster type stood up to ask a question. This was before hipster was common parlance, so we called them San Francisco art students. Her question was whether Don had been influenced by pretentious random artists that no one in the room had ever heard of, said with absolutely no context to give anyone a hint about it, as if to convey the idea that all worthy people have naturally heard of and studied the work of this artist, and the rest of us were all posers. Well, Don said had never heard of the artist either, but managed to do it in such a way that was simultaneously dismissive and just the right touch of contemptuous. It was glorious. The only other thing I remember about her was she managed to work in the phrase, "Oh, I don't have a TV somehow," during this exchange. Story 11. I just activated Facebook timeline. Half the things I posted 7 years ago. Edit, oh dear. Apparently there's a discussion about if I really had it 7 years ago. Sorry, I was rounding up. It says I joined on February 25th, 2005, so 6 years, 10 months. Story 12. One of my first roommates was from a very rich Indonesian family. She had never dressed herself before. And on our first morning, she stood up and outstretched her arms and waited for me to dress her. I looked her dead in the face and told her she wasn't my Barbie. She got the hint and discovered the wonders of buttons that day. Story 13, I work in a police dispatch center, and a rather prominent woman of our town called in to report some damage done to her front porch. She insisted she would only deal with the chief of police and no one else. This was about 10 p.m. I informed her that A, the chief is only at station during business hours, and B, he would not be handling this case anyway, as any patrol officer could handle it. She insisted I call the chief at home and have him come in, or send an officer to his home to wake him, as she was too important to deal with a patrol officer. Story 14, all hints of thoughts of envy over my friend's good-looking Irish boyfriend came to a stop when the following came out of his mouth. The thing about real jazz is you don't listen to the music listens to you, haha. Oh, my 56 upvotes, he's a Redditor as it happens, so I hope he sees this and feels suitably chastised. Story 15, I don't know about speechless, but I often find it pretentious when someone replies to something with a quote. I will not enter a battle of wits with an unarmed man as a favorite, but George Orwell quotes are the worst. It's ironic that the sort of people who like to call everyone else sheeple are interchangeable individuals who somehow manage to all think and talk exactly alike. I mean, come on, most of these people never even read 1984. Story 16, at a Starbucks near my office in Midtown Manhattan, where everybody is a Banana Republic clone, there's an employee who takes drink orders before you reach the register. He doesn't wear anything like a hat, apron, or a name tag which identifies him as a Starbucks employee. Not having encountered him before, I suggested that he should wear some Starbucks swag. His response, no. The guests of this Starbucks expect a more professional experience. Story 17, think I have posted this before in a Biggest Hipster Moment thread, but I still think it applies. I met a girl in a hostel once who had all you need is love tattooed on her navel. I said to her, so are you a big Beatles fan then? She replied that it had nothing to do with the Beatles, that she came up with it on her own, and it was her philosophy, and it was about her own spiritual journey. Needless to say, I was speechless. TLDR girl born several years after John Lennon's death claimed she coined the phrase, all you need is love. Story 18, this is kind of the opposite. When I was in high school as a freshman looking to volunteer at the local museum, I decided I wanted to work in the physics lab. They asked me why, and I said, well, I already know everything about everything else. 19-year-old me wants to go back and slap 13-year-old me several times. Story 19, I was riding along with my brother and sister-in-law when they were casually house hunting, and I directed them to a very nice neighborhood where one of my cousins' lives, my brother and sis-in-law, are both attorneys and own their firm and are pretty successful, so I thought they would like this neighborhood. As we drive through my cousin's neighborhood, my sister-in-law scoffs in disbelief, and I quote, how does your cousin afford to live in this area? She's a dentist, and her husband is a teacher. How can they afford to live here? And we can't yet. I am an attorney. I should be living here. My brother and I were speechless. When I tell horror stories about her, I like to tell this one so people can get an idea of the kind of person she is. Story 20, I wrote a Facebook status about how enjoyable it was to study when you're the one teaching the material to someone. This turned into a conversation with my friend about how much he likes to over-explain things when he's drunk, and how funny he is when he's drunk. This girl named chimes in well. Am glad that Eve sworn to never drink, to which my friend and I say, that's fine, to each their own. And she is the nerd to say nah. Eve known too many alcoholics to ever let a drop touch past my lips, and something about there's no such thing as moderation with alcohol. And I say, well, I grew up with an alcoholic mother. Watched her get beaten by her equally alcoholic boyfriends, puke blood regularly, and pass out daily, all when I was 5. I know what moderation is. She then says, well, you have a right to your own opinion, but I simply cannot respect anyone who drinks alcohol. She makes statements like this on a regular basis. If you hunt, smoke, eat meat, don't believe in God, drink, ECT, she thinks you're a bad person. She also manages to make every single conversation all about herself, and is one of those infuriating people who will talk your ear off about her problems and refuse to listen to any advice. Arg. Story 21, ruin value. Albert Speer, Hitler's chief architect, coined the term for designing buildings that would look good after thousands of years as ruins. Shows how the promise of the Third Reich could get to your head. Story 22, I work as a bartender, and our wine bottles range from 42 to the most expensive bottle of wine, which is a 75 bottle of Petite Syrah. One day, these two women came in to see the wine list by bottles and said that our wine, including the Syrah, were too low-brow for their taste, and walked away. An older English woman sitting at the bar overheard, looked at me, and said, oh geez, with a Rothschild, LOL. Story 23, I have a friend who has this really irritatingly pretentious habit of saying of course you do after someone expresses an opinion he disagrees with. For instance, I think Sublime was one of the best bands in the 90s, of course you do. Story 24, I guess your movie was entertaining, but you need to focus more on visuals than story. Story doesn't account for anything in film. My film teacher. Story 25, working at a grocery store in a small town, I was taking a check and asked for the ID, and the dumb said, "Don't you know who I am?" And I said, "Obviously not. And if I did, I doubt I would be impressed since you're shopping here." So I guess I wasn't quite speechless, but it was totally worth it when she asked to speak to the manager, and I showed her on my name tag that I was that shift's manager. She never wrote a check without showing ID again. Story 26, my roommate is a pretty nice guy. But when we play Super Smash Brothers, his ego goes through the roof, and he doesn't realize it. When he starts doing poorly, he convinces himself that everyone is going for him, when in reality people who are near him attack him because they're near him. Anyways, a couple weeks ago he said, and I quote, "I know why you guys always go for me. You don't like to see me in first at the end of the game. I guess I would get pretty fed up too if someone else kept winning all the time. I have never met a person in my life who takes casual video gaming as seriously as he does." Story 27, I heard a kid in the library the other day talking about how he was going to fail one of his finals. Then he said, "It doesn't matter. Once you're in the one, it's not like you can leave." Story 28, I went to school with this girl who copied everyone's work and didn't end up graduating, but she acts like she's the most intelligent being to ever walk the face of the earth. She basically shits on everyone for liking things that are currently popular and complains about how she's the only person left in our generation that reads Shakespeare and loves anything classical. She recently made a fan page for herself on Facebook and posts quotes that she comes up with and artsy pictures of herself. Story 29, my family is rich and upper class. Still doesn't mean we're pretentious dicks. But the amount of pretentious we get from others in our community, we're Pakistani, it's usually from marriage. Worse when I heard her family is so poor. The dad's only a pharmacist, and her skin color, it's so dark, it's usually about skin color and money. Since my family is rich and am very, very white in my skin tone, I get a lot of compliments from these pretentious hags. I usually just say, "We're actually drug overlords. This isn't my real skin. I'm going to marry a black man." It usually freaks them out. Story 30, I always find the Keep Tahoe blue bumper stickers on SUVs to be pretty pretentious. And I don't think the people who put the oval Outer Banks OBX stickers on their cars on the East Coast understand the joke. Firefighters can be pretty full of themselves, former femme here. I don't know how many times I've heard one say something to the nature of, "Hey, we can't spare the time to do that. We're too busy saving lives out there." Vomit. Story 31, anyone who argues with arguments from personal incredulity drives me up the wall. Anything like you can't actually believe that the entire Arctic is melting, or I can't imagine how a monkey turns into a person, or how could anything come to be if there's no God, or I can't imagine communism ever working because of human nature, shut the up. None of those are arguments. The failures of your imagination are not evidence of anything. It's like people are so arrogant that they think that their own personal limits of imagination define the possibilities of the entire world. Story 32, I make Christmas presents for my family and friends because I'm broke in college and it's fun. This year I'm canning salsa, and I asked my boyfriend if he wanted to split the cost with me. He said in the haughtiest voice I've ever heard, "No thanks, I buy my family presents," and then proceeded to tease me for being cheap. Ginormous red flag. Story 33, I was watching that show where contestants have each other over for dinner parties and rate the experience. There was this sweet little Irish lady and then a bunch of pretentious foodies. She made a shrimp appetizer with a rose sauce that all of the foodies were gushing over. They kept talking about detecting a hint of this or a touch of that or whatever. And then the camera panned back to the Irish lady, her secret recipe. It's just mayonnaise and ketchup, TLDR mayo, and ketchup is delicious. Story 34, some years back, before I stopped talking to my extended paternal family, I attended a family gathering. One of my cousins is an officer in the Army. I asked him how the Army was treating him. His wife grabbed his arm and purred he's a hero. So I asked, "Oh, what did you do?" He gave his offended giggle. She looked at me like ID crawled from under a pond rock, and the entire room went silent. Amid a great many disapproving glares and mutterings, I was informed that serving in the military makes him a hero, regardless of what he does. Later, when they were praying and listing all the veterans in the family and those currently serving, they left me out again. I'm a veteran. I served through a few military actions, but I don't have a penis. Ergo, not a hero. I still wonder if it was me who was being pretentious. I didn't say anything to them about leaving me out, though. Story 35, my cousin was staying with me because she was running away from her crazy boyfriend. She's used to a life in a gated housing community where money is handed to her. I live in a middle-class neighborhood, and she stayed in my extra bedroom with her kids. We were on our way to get her daughter, and went to the gated community she used to live in. She said to me, "You have to go in and get her. I would just die if anyone saw me like this." After we left, she sighed and said, "I can't live like this. I just can't do this anymore." Thinking she had come to her senses, she followed it with, "I have to get my nails done. Look at them." Story 36. I was in a class where the professor was really not competent and most of the class was understandably struggling. I was having a hard time in the class as well, but the girl who sat next to me understood the material, having covered much of it in high school. While someone was struggling with an example and asking questions, she suddenly said, "UGGHH, now I finally understand why gifted kids get so frustrated and act out. We're education majors. This must be how gifted kids feel all the time." I was amazed that anyone would be that arrogant. Story 37. So me and my housemates were hanging out at uni. Some of us reading, some of us watching TV and chatting, while I was cooking our family dinner. When our other housemate, Sarah, comes back in from the pub with a guy she had hit it off with, he rubbed me up the wrong way immediately, dressed like a Panic at the Disco groupie. He's been invited for family dinner. So Sarah had committed a faux pas akin to a guy inviting his girlfriend to a lawn party. "What are we having?" this young of the walk shouted through to the kitchen. Putanesque, I shout back, and he marches through to introduce himself as Prue. He had a small Swarovski nose ring. He gets all pally and asks, "Are you using Ventresca tuna or albacore? Did you fry your garlic and chili in the tuna oil? Are you adding extra anchovies? Have you put the cinnamon in yet? Because I can't smell it. Can you put the capers in when you mix it up?" and leaves him out of my bowl. Am not a fan. He read the murder in my face and excused himself. I could hear him ask one housemate what he was reading and telling him to read Jack Kerouac. He rounded on the other and compared his taste in electro to his own taste 4 years ago. We sit down to eat and the mood is very awkward, but Sarah is beaming, so we all make an effort. He gives my food the compliment sandwich. 2 positives with criticism in the middle. The threatens to burn us all a copy of his band's demo and asks me if he'll help build him a blog. Sarah points out his new tattoo on his wrist. I can read it from here. It says "Nil desperandum," he pipes in, delighted to return to his favorite subject. I wanted to get something that will keep people guessing, as nobody really knows Latin in the UK. Thesta. It means "do not despair," or some variation on "I cut him off." Story 38. Once at a restaurant here in Boston, with a bunch of friends, we all clearly saw and heard a man at one of the other tables whistle that shrill whistle and yell out "Garen" very loudly to call a waiter over. He was completely in earnest about it. A waiter came over and he asked for something. We were all speechless for a few moments of "did that just really happen?" Story 39. This girl told me that she thought she could get over a death in her direct family in 6 months. That person also hadn't experienced anything remotely similar. What a moron. Story 40. Once, when I was explaining to someone why I didn't care for the movie There Will Be Blood, they dismissed me with a wave of her hand. "And you probably just didn't get it." She was serious. Story 41. The following is an excerpt from a 1979 edition of the Rolling Stone Record Guide. The author is Russell Gersten. Gee, I wonder if he went to film school a decade ago, trying to analyze his feelings about the 2 most fashionable new wave film directors. Critic Andrew Sayers concluded that while Jean-Jacques Godard was decidedly more brilliant, more innovative, and more profound, as time went by, the gentle, leisurely insights of Fresnoy's Truffaut became more valued. I don't think the metaphor has to be stretched very far to apply to the Spinners. They've never received the praise addressed to the OJs. The Blue Notes, or Al Green, the very smoothness and gentleness of their music has been used against them. Yet few soul albums of the 70s are as genuinely pleasurable as Pick of the Litter, Mighty Love, and Spinners. Story 42. I know you try to be good people, so I'm fine with my daughter playing with your daughter. My Christian coworker talking to me atheist about how she was okay with our 6-year-old daughters playing after her daughter had a meltdown, but recovered when she found out that my daughter doesn't believe in gods. Later in the conversation, she said, "You see, our moral compass comes from above. I don't know how it is with you." Edit added the smug emphasis on try. Story 43. Don't know if this is necessarily pretentious, but it's egotistical. After we get a test back, the kid who I sit next to in bio looks up at me all bewildered and goes, "It's almost like she's taking off points because I'm smarter than her." Story 44. This will get buried, but here goes. My wife and I were sitting in an outdoor cafe in northern Michigan when a guy sat down at the next table. He leans over and asks us what we ordered, which are both meat dishes. We tell him, and he leans back, crosses his arms, and says, "I'd like to compliment you on your choices, but I'm a vegetarian." Then he smugly turned around and continued smoking his clove cigarette. Story 45. I was eating lunch, and a friend's girlfriend says how she's going to some foreign country, I forget which one, for a high school band trip. I explain they don't really like Americans, and she replies with, they have to be nice to me. It just annoyed me even more, because she isn't even that pretty. Edit, I remembered she actually said, they have to like me. Story 46 license plate on a Porsche Boxster. Get in, by not sure if they saw the irony on it being on a Boxster. The cheapest Porsche manufactured, and made solely for the purpose of lowering the price of buying a Porsche as a status symbol. Story 47 had a friend in high school who, no matter what band you're talking about, he would always chime in, oh, dude, I saw them live way before they were popular, and only their first album is the real stuff worth listening to, or some hipster like that. One day, my friends and I decided to completely make up a band and talk about it, and he said all the exact same. Story 48, I was working as the assistant manager of Goodwill, and some lady walked into the store, a little yappy dog in hand, and proceeded to put it into the part of the shopping cart you said her baby. I calmly proceed to say, excuse me, we do not allow pets in the store. She tells me her dog has separation anxiety, and she cannot leave him out in the car. My mouth fell open, and I stared at her for a full 3 seconds before even starting to think about how to respond. Story 49, while at a party someone started speaking about religion. Knowing how this would play out, I decided to sit back and watch. At some point, I started zoning out and began checking out many other things on my Android. Finally, I heard some guy in a douchey voice say this, Gem. Do you even know the Four Noble Truths? I immediately began bursting out in laughter and told the group that was the most pretentious thing I have ever heard a human say. Story 50 went to college with a guy who proclaimed to only hang out with other hot people. A couple of months later, we were hanging around in a big group, very drunk, and he confessed that he had a small penis. Hilarious. Story 51, talking with a friend of mine at uni. Both of us have had problems the past in high school. She's bulimic, and I was a self-harmer to the point of suicide. Anyway, she's still got her problems, and I give her the number of the hospital I went to, which helped me get my life back on track in an attempt to help and stop her bitching about her life and do something about it. She looks at the number, wrinkles her nose, crumples the paper up, and throws it away. I ask her why, and her response, you gave me the number of an NHS hospital. I don't do the NHS. I've got private healthcare for a reason. We're both British, and for the non-British, we get our free healthcare on the NHS, but if you're rich, you can opt out and pay for your healthcare. This from a girl who still claims she has problems and will supposedly do anything to get rid of them. Beggars can't be choosers. Sunshine. Story 52, standing at the end door at Costco, a man walked in from the rain, proceeded at me about the weather and how his cart was too wet. I pointed out we have a ShamWow cloth within reach and told him to feel free to dry off his cart. The man got angry at me and told me I don't work here. You dry my cart off, they pay you people enough. Needless to say, I didn't wipe off, and he stormed off with a still wet cart. I hoped the rest of that day a pallet of solid lead fell on him. Story 53, not my story, but my dad's. Still makes me laugh every time. In the 70s, my dad and his friend decided to round in Massachusetts after college. My dad's friend's parents lived in an affluent area. One day, they decide to go to a polo match. They proceed to get stoned, and they show up to the polo match in their Grateful Dead t-shirts. Completely unshaven, my dad and his friend decide to go crash the VIP area, which is this roped-off little area in the stands. There's a single young woman sitting there, so my dad and his friend decide to ask her if they can sit, to which she replies, I don't mind, but mummy might. I wish I could type exactly how the women said this, but alas, I cannot. Story 54, me raised Jewish, and a friend and atheist were approached by a very narrow-minded Christian kid. He goes up to my friend and goes, you're atheist, right? And of course my friend responds, yes. He turns to me and goes, and you're Jewish? I tell him yes in a very annoyed voice. The guy then goes, that's the same thing anyways. I literally had just experienced the most ignorant, blatantly false statement of my entire life, and I was speechless. Story 55, my bar is a great cocktail bar, but a lot of people are taking the whole booze snob thing too far. The bartenders hate it, so I'm sitting there, and this douchey, fedora-clad 3 set comes in, sits down, looks around. Then one of them says, let's get out of here. This place doesn't even make its own vermouth. Story 56, I was at a scholarly conference, and someone came up to me to tell me a well-known and much-published author, standing across the room, wanted to speak to me. The implication was I should walk over to talk to her. I told the messenger, tell her she may approach. Story 57, I've got an aunt barely married into the family who thinks she's the end-all, be-all of photography because she has a 5D too and has gone to a photography school. I won't say she's bad at it, but she has told me that setting my camera to aperture priority will open the aperture more than having it set to manual. Anywho, I was at a family gathering in my grandparents' house, hanging out, taking pictures, generally having a good time. I had my camera with me and was taking an odd photo or two, and I snap a photo of said aunt's dog, which I show to my aunt's daughter, who then says to her mom something along the lines of, "Mom, come look at this photo." I'm not entirely, but pretty sure that she didn't even look and simply responded with, "Yeah, I take pictures like that all the time." I don't use this word a lot, Red ever, but she is a straight-up grade A. Story 58 went to visit my friend who worked at a computer store. I was behind this other guy my friend at the cash had never seen before. The guy was looking down his phone. So my friend said, "Excuse me, mister." The guy looked up and said, "Listen, I didn't go to med school for 7 years to be called mister." Story 59, I pay your salary. I have heard that from homeowners before. Am a property manager. No. Your HOA pays my company, and my company pays me way more than your own piddly monthly dues. Homeowners, board members especially, get all crazy when they think they have a little power. They say and do things to us managers that they might never say in a normal situation. Then we have to go do the things they want us to do, like make ridiculous demands of contractors. I want them to shovel the snow at 3 a.m. I think they probably just hate themselves because they live in a desolate, boring suburb and have no lives. Story 60, when I was in university, one of my friends who didn't go to the school often came to visit us because he was dating a girl that also went to the same school. Anyways, one of my other friends who I no longer talk to is talking to the us. He begins to complain about how much homework he has and the difficulty of university. He then turns to friend one and says, "Oh, but you wouldn't understand, like, seriously, friend two said a lot of other like that, so I just stopped talking to him at all." Story 61, I was having an argument with a conspiracy theorist, and he was losing the debate so badly that he told me, "Sometimes you just need to ignore the facts and go with what you feel is right." I was literally speechless. I gave him the "Are you serious?" face for a full minute without blinking. Story 62, you cannot come with me at Chez Georges because you're too bourgeois. Said my parents pay everything, both your flat and weed XGF, when I asked her why she had never invited me to come to this jazz nightclub for the poshy youth of the 6th Parisian district, a very, very, very poshy and rich neighborhood. Story 63, after my grandma died, my father bought the house, and we moved in when I was about 6. Our neighbors next door had an awesome tree house. I went over to say hi and see if there were any kids there. The neighbors had 2 daughters and a son all around my age. They said straight to my face that I couldn't play with them or play on the swing set or the tree house. The father worked in a tannery. Actually, kind of trash ball, our neighbor behind us said right to my parents, "My husband is an important doctor, and we do not talk to our neighbors." The first day, my father was an accountant, my grandfather a surgeon. Like, that is way more baffling than a cake eater acting like a cake eater. Really pretentious guy I had to work with in a play a few years ago. I overheard him talking about growing up in a rich town, but in me, where are you from again? Greenwich, him, ha, Greenwich, no. Greenwich is all new money, me, oh. Story 64, in my identity and citizenship class, this mature student just came out and had a massive go at the tutor about how she didn't like how he was teaching the class. And she was saying things like, "I don't know about everyone else, but I think that blah, blah teaching skills, blah, blah. I think you should, etc." The poor guy couldn't even get a word in. And when he could, she says, "Excuse me, let me finish, haven't seen her in my group for a while." Story 65, this comment on music regarding why people hate on Coldplay. Story 66, I had of a store manager at Sears once give me my yearly review. Afterwards, he asked me to grab the next person and tell them to come to his office. He followed it up by saying, "If you get Bob to come, I might let you have my pen." I just stared at him for like a solid 5 seconds, dumbfounded. Then I smiled and walked away. Story 67, I answered the phone to one of the managing directors of the company I work at. I said, "Hello." He said, "Hi." Then I asked how I could help him. He then went mental because ID asked how I could help him and that I didn't know what he wanted or who he was. I quipped my voice recognition software couldn't obtain motive or identity from 2 letters, thinking nobody could be so stuck up and that he must be joking. He got me my first written warning, which I keep somewhere, because of its comedy value. Story 68, I was at a grocery store the day before Thanksgiving, and the place was a madhouse. I was waiting in a long line at the checkout, and the store hung a line closed sign on my cart, as I was going to be the last one to be checked out in this line. As I was almost finished checking out, a woman dragging around a young girl, maybe 8 years old, wearing a fur coat, grabbed the line closed sign and moved it behind her stuff that she was setting on the checkout belt. She did not want to wait in the open checkout lines like everyone else. After she had done this, she leaned down and said to her child, "This is what you have to do. You have to make sure you get what you want." I almost puked. I hope she has fun raising that soon-to-be little brat. Story 69, anything that comes out of my roommate's mouth. Hey, race, an example of a conversation that has happened at least 4 times. Roommate, I just think it would be great if all kids had to spend some time, let's say, 6 months living abroad in order to graduate high school. In Canada and Mexico, don't count. Mioka way. And are you going to be paying for all of this? Roommate, huh? No, why? Me, so where's the money for that going to come from? Roommate, what do you mean they'll pay for themselves? Me, traveling is expensive. What about the 90? And I'm being generous here of people who couldn't possibly afford to do that. Roommate, well, they can stop being lazy and get jobs if they need money.